Okay. Uh, right. So let me first start with what is machine learning. So I'm pretty sure most of us have heard about the term, but I will try to briefly define it. So machine learning basically means building a system which is able to automatically learn and improve from experience without being explicitly programmed. In simple words, if you take this example y equals to fx, you will see that normally what happens is in machine learning is, say for example, you specify the inputs, that is the x, you specify the outputs, that is y, and then the job of the machine learning model is to determine or estimate what fx can be. That is the job of a machine learning model. Now this exactly doesn't hold true for unsupervised learning, but I won't be going over there in this webinar. Now many of you must have also heard about the term deep learning. So what is deep learning? Deep learning is a subset of machine learning where the models are much bigger, much more complex, contains multiple layers. And the reason deep learning is so prevalent nowadays is because most of the recent results, the recent breakthroughs that have come in machine learning has come from deep learning. But it is much easier, and it is obviously recommended to actually start from machine learning to build a proper foundation, so I won't go into deep learning today. And what is artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence refers to the simulation of human intelligence, basically the type of intelligence that humans are very good at, say recognizing a cat or a dog, but there are those type of things which are much difficult for machines to do in traditional in traditional programmed way. But using machine learning, these things becomes much easier. And if you see this diagram, it encapsulates very well the relationship. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Another term that we hear is what is data analytics. So data analytics is basically exploration of data to get meaningful insights, because ultimately we can store a lot of data, but the data points are only as useful as the amount of relevant information that we can get out of them. And why are these things so relevant today compared to say a decade or two ago? There are many reasons, but one of the very interesting reason is that there has been a huge explosion in the amount of data that we collect, that we store, and everything in all facets of life. So these type of tools are much useful now than they were useful say decades ago. With that, I will dive right in. That is how I will proceed throughout this webinar, by giving code based examples and then explaining few of the concepts. So let's and again, if you want to follow along, you are most welcome to go to that GitHub link and execute the same code in Colaboratory. It should be easy enough. So let's see. So I want to basically just one second. Okay, so while the Colaboratory loads, so what I want to basically do is there are these data points, right? Just one second. Sorry. Right. Sorry for the disturbance. Basically, you have to execute from the very top. Okay, so I have plotted these data points. This is a synthetic data set that I generated using Python, and basically what you can see is it contains the x. So in machine learning, it is very common for x to be the input and y to be the output. And if you see from above, what we basically want to do is from x derive y, and the job of the machine learning model is to estimate f of x. So that is what we'll be trying to do today, right now. So what we can see is that there is x0 and there is x1, right, which is the two input parameters for each of these data points, and the color is the output. So there is blue color, there is red color, and the thing that we will try to do is we'll try to basically separate blue and red, that is the output class, as best as we can. So if I do x dot shape, so I won't be going through each of the things that each of the line of code that I will be writing today. You are most welcome to Google it and learn more about it as you go. I will be only explaining the important concepts, right? So x dot shape basically tells us what is the dimension of x. So there are 10,000 data points, and each of those data points has two columns for x, that is the input, and y has so basically y has 10,000 data points, and each of them has just single output, so 10,000, right? Now we will use something called logistic regression. We will use something called logistic regression to create a we'll use something called logistic regression to basically try and separate those two classes. So here I will tell you about the library that I am using later, but here I am basically defining a logistic regression model, and here, so logistic regression dot fit, what it does is basically takes the input and the output, and it trains the model to predict the output, that is predict y based on the data that is given, right? And here it prints out the coefficient and the intercept, which I'll come to later. Okay, and now I want to see how it predicted, so I can just execute this. So what you can see is this is the line that the model predicted, right? And as you can see, this line clearly separates blue and red quite well. And if you want to see how well, then we can just do dot score, which will determine the accuracy of the model. The accuracy is 99.45. So 99.45% for 99.45% of the data points, the model was able to accurately predict the result, which is quite good. And if you are not sure that if you think that I might be pulling some hokey pokey stuff, so what you can do here is you can basically
Actually, sorry to interrupt. I think you have been muted by someone. So can you please unmute yourself?
okay, just 1 second.
It's not clear.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it is okay now.
Yeah, okay.
So when did I get muted, like till which part?
While you were explaining the accuracy.
5 seconds.
Okay, cool, thank you. 1 sec. Right, so the accuracy is 99.45%. So 99.45% of the times the model was able to accurately predict all of the data points that has been given here. So it's quite good, right? And we can even just give it examples. So for x0, you can see this is x0. So say I will input -1 for x0, and I will input say 3 for 3 for x1. So -1 and 3. So it will fall somewhere around here, which is supposed to be blue class. And if we take this and execute it, we can see that the output is class 1, right? But if we make sure that it falls in red, so if x0 is -1 and x1 is say -4, then the output is class 0, right? So this is a very basic model that we have built now. Now let's come to the library that we are using. I won't go into any of the details regarding the library, but I will give you that much information so that you are able to understand what is going on here, right? So we are using a library called scikit-learn here. Scikit-learn is very good for traditional machine learning, is a very good traditional machine learning library, and it's very easy to use too. Can the rest of you please mute? Okay, so all we need to do is from sklearn import estimator. Estimator here means the name of the model, right? So we did from sklearn import logistic regression, and then model equals to logistic regression. We instantiate the model, we do model.fit, and then we do model.predict. Instead of model.predict, we did model.score. But yeah, these things will again come back here. But so the basic thing is very easy. Just import the model, initiate the model, initialize the model, run dot fit to train the model, and run dot predict to predict the model. It's as simple as that. The top level thing, right? Okay. Now let's try to basically let's try it on another data set, right? And this data set, as you can see, is much more noisy. As you can see, this is the red region, but there are a lot of blue examples here. Okay. Now let's see how our model performs in this for this data set. So I train another logistic regression. I mean another logistic regression model here, and I fit it to my noisy data set, and then I plot it to see what type of boundary did it predict. And as you can see, this boundary doesn't look so good, right? And if you see, this thing will be reflected in the score also, hopefully. The score is 87.83%, so it's much worse than than for the previous data set. So what that means is basically the data set has, so depending on how complex your data set is or how noisy your data set is, your model will perform differently. And here also we can just give two inputs and try to predict anything. For example, it's 0 here and 0.5 here. So let's run this, and as you can see, output equals to class 1, right? But if I put it way down, say x1 equals to -4, then hopefully the output should be class 0, right? So that was a very basic model. Now let's try to understand in very brief how this model is actually trained. Okay. So it involves some mathematical notations, but it's not complex enough at all. So our inputs were x0 and x1, and we can take it together as x. Then we calculate the predictions by doing basically this is a straight line, right? So what we do is, it's basically an mx plus c, and m and c we have to predict, and these are called weights. So the weights are basically the thing that the model tunes so that it can estimate the function and properly predict the output. Okay, the truth value has been marked as y, and this is y hat. Okay, and then what happens is there is something called a loss function. So the loss function gives an estimate of how good or bad the model is performing on that particular example. And based on the loss function, we update the weights. The model updates the weights. For this one, it is m and c, and at the end of the training we get weights m and c, which are hopefully optimized for data set we wanted to train on. Now coming back here, the thing that we printed here, dot coefficient. Okay, these are m, the m that we can see here, these are m, and the c is this one. Okay, so all logistic regression model is doing is basically calculating the slope and also calculating the calculating c. And see, you can here see a like a gif of how a model is actually being fitted. The blue line is the true separation line, and the model, as you can see, it is going through many epochs. Epochs basically means number of iterations for this purpose, and here you can see that the model is more or less converging to that thing. Okay, now let's try a more difficult example. So let us create another data set, synthetic data set for us to use. So this data set is, so now we'll try to predict this data set. It's the same. This also has two input parameters, x0 and x1, and the output is the color, basically blue and red. Okay, now we'll try the same logistic regression model. Let's see how this logistic regression model predicts. So now what we can see is that this logistic regression model is actually not doing well. We can very easily see based on our intuition that this is not a proper boundary for the logistic regression model, but the model actually can't do much more about it, because the current model that we have chosen, that model can only divide the data set based on a straight line because of the way the model is set up. Okay, so even if you train it for long or do whatever you like, this model is not going to.
Reek, can you do something? Can you just stop the presentation for once and restart it again? We started presenting it and it's all messed up for many people. Thank you.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so as I was saying, right, so for this data set, this straight line does not seem to be a good fit. So let's try something else. Okay, right now I will skip this part about normalizing data. I will come back to this later. Okay, let's try a non-linear model. So basically, I hope all of you know the difference between linear and non-linear. So this is, as you can see clearly, it's a linear model, right? It's a straight line, so it's a linear model. And now let's try some non-linearity. We'll try something called SVM, support vector machines. Okay. So now it's the same process. So instead of importing logistic regression, we import SVC, okay, which is basically a type of support vector machine for classification. Excuse me. And then we fit the model to the new data set, and then we see the accuracy score for that model. It's 98.9% accuracy, which is much better than the logistic regression model. Now let's see how this model actually predicted. Right. If you see how this model was actually predicted, this decision boundary line seems much better compared to the previous one, right? You can see that it is no longer limited by linearity. It can make a curve instead of a straight line. So we can say that this is a better fit. Okay. Now there are a lot of things. So now the question is, then is it something like we just choose the model that we want to train the data on, and then just and then the model will take care of everything by itself? No, it's not the case, and I'll show you something. So now I'll train the same SVM model, but with slight difference. See, I have introduced a new parameter called C, and I've put it to a very large value. And if you see here, I had not mentioned any parameter C, and if the default value of C is much smaller, right? So now let's see how this affects the model. So basically, the difference between the previous model and this model is that there is this parameter C set to a very large value. Now let's try to see what happens here. So if you see the score for the new model, it's 99.8% accuracy, while the previous one was 98.9% accuracy. So actually the accuracy improved by a lot. Now let's see how the prediction happened, like what was the decision boundary like. Okay, now the decision boundary is very wavy and curvy and everything. Okay, and you can also see that there is a small boundary here also. Okay, that this is interesting. Now, does it look like a very good decision boundary to you? Okay, so before coming to that point, let's see how hyperparameters affect your model. So let's understand what are hyperparameters. So hyperparameters are certain parameters which controls how the model behaves. For example, there is something called learning rate, there is something called regularization, and all of these has various impacts on your model. So what I set here as C, this C is also a hyperparameter, and depending on what value I set to the hyperparameter, I set it to a very large value here, and I set it to a much smaller value here. As you can see here, C is here equals to 1.0, while C for this one is equals to, I don't know like how much it's, but it's a very big number. Okay, so this is the thing. And now let's see what C stands for, the C that we changed here. What does it stand for? One second. Yeah, So C stands for regularization parameter. The strength of the regularization is in, and this is straight from the documentation that you can find in this link. The strength of the regularization is inversely proportional to C, must be strictly positive. The penalty is a squared L2 penalty. Now you don't need to understand any of this, but what I am basically trying to say here is that C, each and every hyperparameters has some effect. Okay. Now let's see a very interesting thing. So we saw these two models that have been predicted, that have been trained. One is this one with these type of decision function, and the other one is this one which has a very much more squiggly decision function. Now let's see which one actually generalizes well. So we will again generate the same type of data set. This is called Moon's data set, but we'll generate it slightly differently. Okay. So what I did was the random state. So this is something that is used where you basically initialize the seed differently. So it generates a slightly different distribution. So the random state for this one, while the random state for the previous Moon's data set is slightly different. So the distribution will be slightly different. And let's see how this distribution looks. So in essence, this distribution looks the same. But if you notice notice it carefully, it will be slightly different from the distribution that was taken earlier. Now let's find the score of both the models, that is the last two models that I showed, on these on this data set, that is the new data set. Okay. Now if you remember correctly, SVM-CLF is the model that I trained first. Okay. And SVM-CLF, when I used the score earlier, if you would have noticed here, let's go back. So for the first model, the SVM score was 98.9%, and if you remember, the name of the model is SVM-CLF. For the second model, the performance was 99.8%, and the name of this model is SVM-CLF non-REG. Okay. But if we see the score of both these models with this data set, which is slightly different, we can see that for the first one, the model's performance is 98.6%, while for the second one, the one which performed better previously, the performance is 98.3%. Now this is surprising. There one model performed better, which performed worse here. Now why is that? Now I hope some of you have already figured out the answer to this. The answer is that the second model that we trained, it basically what it did was it adjusted itself too much based on the given data set, and therefore it could not generalize well. And the problem with doing that is that the data set that you train on will never be the data set that you actually see while you are using the model in production. That won't ever be the case. So if your data set fits very nicely to the training data but can't generalize well to, say, the during production or during testing, then that is a problem. And for that we need something called test set. So what we can test set is something, training set is something on which we train the data on, but from that we just separate a few examples and use that for testing only, so that we understand how the model performs on the data that is not trained on. Basically, it's the difference between having an exam and having an open book test. When you have an open book test, you are basically I don't know whether this is a very good example, but you are basically being trained on you are basically being tested on the training data, while in an exam you are basically being tested on test set, let's say. Okay. Now let's see the new, like how this model to understand, let's see how this, for the new data set, how does the graph look like, the graph that we have been plotting till now. Okay. So this is the graph for the first model, the first model that we trained. For the second model that we trained, this is what it looks like, and as you can see, this looks much more out of place. It might not be very visible at once, but if you observe it closely, you will notice that it is like, it is not generalizing well here, while this decision boundary fits quite well even with this different data set. Okay. And this brings us to two more important topics. One is bias versus variance. So what is bias? So bias basically is the simplifying assumptions made by the model to make the target function easier to approximate. So what that basically means is that the user or whoever is training the model, that person constrained the model in such a way that basically it is not able to learn as much as it possibly should. And a very good example of this is actually here. So here we know that using a logistic regression we can only train a linear the decision boundary can only be a straight line, but we can clearly see from this example that a straight line won't be enough. So here we have introduced bias, because of which the model is not able to perform better. Okay, and we have introduced bias by selecting a model which won't be suitable for that data set. What is variance? Variance is the amount that the estimate of the target function will change given different training data. So if you want to see a example of high variance, we can take this example, this one, where basically just to fit the training data, the decision boundary has been modified way too much, so much that it doesn't generalize well, and that is a problem, as I have mentioned it before. So that is variance. And a good machine learning model should ensure that there isn't too much bias or too much variance in the model. It should be a good fit for the data that is trained on, and at the same time it should also give good performance during prediction. What this basically means is that you should train your model in such a way that it should perform well on training data also, it should generalize well on test data also. Okay, and it is a balance. And related to those two terms comes overfitting and underfitting. So when variance is high and the model performs well on training data but doesn't generalize well to unseen data, that is called overfitting. So an example of overfitting will actually be this model, because it performs very well for training data but doesn't perform well for test data. Okay, and underfitting is when bias is high and the model doesn't perform well both on training data as well as test data because of limited capacity. And an example of underfitting will be this one. It won't perform well for test data also as well as for training data also. Okay, and we can see another example of that here. So for this image, these blue dots are the data points, and this dashed blue line is one of the models that has been trained. This green squiggly line is another model, and this red line is another model. Now if we see here, this red model is very simple and therefore can be considered as underfitting. This blue line seems to be a good fit and should generalize well even for the test data set, while this green line is trying to approximate the training data way too much and it won't generalize well, right? So that is an example of overfitting. Okay, right. So now enough of like theoretical knowledge, let's try working on a real data set. And the good thing about working on a real data set, to show the example, the reason I wanted to show the workings of a real data set is that you get a flavor of what end-to-end machine learning feels like, all the way from importing the data till publishing the data on a server and putting it in production. I will show you pretty much all the steps. Not all of the steps will be shown in a lot of detail, but I will try to show as much as possible here. Okay, so let's think of a scenario. Imagine you are selected as a machine learning intern for a hotel company who wants to use machine learning to improve their business and workflows. So let's see in brief how will you tackle a typical machine learning task. First you have to understand the task. Then you have to do analysis of the data set that is given to you to get better understanding of what are the strengths and weaknesses of the data set. Then you have to do feature engineering, which I'll explain later. Then you have to do pre-processing of data. That is, you have to change your data or modify your data in such a way that actually you can use it for training a machine learning model. Then you have to create a test set, select a relevant performance metric. I will explain all these later in the detail. Then you have to do model training, hyperparameter tuning and deployment. So what is the task? the task is predict cancellations of hotel booking, right? So the idea is that there is a hotel which basically wants to know that he can that person can give you all the details of a particular booking and wants to know in advance whether the hotel where that particular booking will be cancelled or not. And to understand it, all we need two things: we need the inputs and the outputs, and then we need a machine learning model which can estimate which can basically predict the output. So these are the, so you can if you open this Google Docs link, then you can actually see the data set. It's a tabular data set basically, which means it is in a table, and you can see all the parameters here. There's a lot of parameters, I won't be going through them, but the most important thing to remember, and you can obviously get the notebook link and go through it yourself if you want, but I don't have that much time right now. But the most important thing to remember is we want to predict this is cancelled. Basically it means whether the booking was cancelled or not cancelled. That is what we want to predict. So let's apply each of the steps that I mentioned before here. So first thing is understanding the problem. So what is the problem? The problem is that we need to predict whether a particular booking will be cancelled or not, and the target column is cancelled, that I had shown above. Now something that you have to note is again this that this is a time series based data set, arrival date being the temporal variable. So there is one component which is the arrival date which is temporal, okay, and so we have to keep some special thing in mind when dealing with time series data that I will come to later. This is a big data set. It contains 119,390 entries. So we have to keep in mind while using while deciding on what type of machine learning algorithm we should use. We can't use algorithms which are too slow to run. Okay. So for reading this database, basically it's a spreadsheet. The database is present in a spreadsheet format. It is still not open. I will show it to you once it opens. And we will be using a library called pandas to actually read the data sheet. Okay, and it will show the first few rows here. What you can see is there are so many parameters here. There are so many columns. There are a lot of columns. Not all of them are shown here, but each of those columns are there. Okay, and you can just close this. The shape is 119390, that is 119390 rows and 32 columns. Okay, now number of NaN. So what NaN means here is basically one of the things about dealing with machine learning, real world machine learning, is that the data set won't be clean. There will be a lot of things in the data set that you take care of. One of those things is missing data points. There very rarely does a scenario will you encounter a scenario where the data set doesn't have any missing data point. Normally it will always have some missing data point. You have to take care of it. So for each column here, it prints a number of rows where it has a missing data point. Okay, so we can see that for four rows, the children column has missing value. For 488 rows, country column has missing value, company has missing value for this many, agent has missing value for this many. Before feeding it into the model, we have to take care of all this, which we will do. Okay, then data.column shows you the name of all the columns that we have. Data.dtypes, what it shows is what are the data types of the different columns. Object, basically you can assume for this for now that object basically means it's a string. Int64 means is integer, float means is float. That's all. Okay, now we need to understand something more, and see, as you will notice that there are a lot of complexities which come when you are working with real world data. Previously we were working with synthetic data, so everything was very easy. Now it will be a little more complicated, right? So first we have to understand categorical variables, ordinal variables, numerical variables. So what are categorical variables? Categorical variables are the variables which take in only specific values but doesn't have an inherent ordering between them. For example, colors. Colors can be red, blue, green, yellow, but you can't say that red is closer to blue, blue is closer to red, blue is closer to green or something like that. There is no inherent ordering in them that we normally use. So that way that way we can so those variables are categorical variables, and we have to do some special things for categorical variables to feed them into the model. Ordinal are similar to categorical variables, but they have an inherent ordering between them. For example, month of year, we can say that January is January is close to February, but January is farther to March, right? So there's an inherent ordering. Numerical, these are normal numerical values, and depending on which model we are building, we might have to treat this different type of data points differently, as we'll see. So I have in this list I have basically given the column names which have categorical variables. How did I get to know which columns have categorical variables? That you have to read the description of the data, you have to understand the data, and then understand for which columns the value should be categorical. And for those, each of those categorical variables, I modified it into string format, and the reason I did it is because string formats inherently work, like for much of the analysis and everything. If we change it to string format, it will automatically become categorical and easy to handle. Now we can do data.describe. What data.describe does is basically it gives you some information about each type of variable, categorical, ordinal, and so on. So say for example hotel, so we can see that there are two unique values in hotel, and the top value that is the one which appears most frequently is city hotel, and it occurs 79,330 times. Now if we take a different type of example, days in waiting list. Now this is not a categorical variable, this is a normal numeric variable, and if we see for this, we can see the minimum 25th percentile, 50th percentile, 75th percentile maximum value, and standard deviation and the average. So we can see these things here. Okay, now let's see the distribution of the categorical classes for each of distribution of the output class for each of the categorical columns. Okay, so this will actually takes like 30 seconds or so. So what we can see here is, say for example hotel, there are two types: resort hotel, city hotel, and 0 means it's not cancelled, 1 means is cancelled. So if you see for resort hotel, the ratio between cancelled to non-cancelled bookings, I think is much better than compared to city hotel. Then say for example, let's see if I can, okay, say market segment. So there is a column called market segment where there are different categories. Say if you notice here, for groups, for the market segment groups, the cancellation outnumbers non-cancellations, which is weird. Okay, that is not normal. So it gives us these type of information. This basically falls under data analysis. At this point we are analyzing the data to understand the data more. Another important thing we need to understand is the distribution of the output, that is the target class. So 0 here means, so here we are plotting the number of times, basically the frequency of values for the target class, the target variable, that is cancelled. So is cancelled 0 means it has not been cancelled, and as you can see here, the not cancelled appears far more often than cancelled. Okay, and these we have to keep in mind later for some special considerations. So if you actually notice the percentage, so 62.95% of the data points, the booking is not cancelled, while for 37.04% of the data points the booking is cancelled. So there was another thing called lead time. Lead time basically means how back the booking has been done. So what I wanted to see here was lead time for cancelled bookings. So if you see here, for cancelled bookings, it was booked much before, right. So if you see for cancelled bookings and for non-cancelled booking, if you compare, the ones that are not cancelled are generally booked much more recently. But if you see from this graph, when the bookings are cancelled, the distribution is far wide. So basically there have been booking 600, 500, 400 days back. So from here we can conclude that how back the booking, like we can't conclude, but we can just get an idea that if the booking was done much back, then there's a good chance that the booking will be cancelled, right? Which makes logical sense also, kind of. I also wanted to see distribution of cancellations month wise. So if you see here, like this, the maximum number of cancellation is August, and at the beginning and the end of the year the number of cancellation is much less. Okay, I think I have to rush a little bit. Step 3 is feature engineering. What feature engineering means is that apart from the data points that you already have, apart from the columns that you already have, you also put your own columns there. You put your own columns if you think that will help with the output. For brevity, I did not show any feature engineering here. Pre-processing your data, so removing columns which might lead to leakage. So what does leakage means? Leakage means that if there is any column which directly gives you an idea of the output class. So our output class is cancelled, whether a booking will be cancelled or not, right? So there were columns called reservation status and these type of things. So reservation status directly gives an idea whether a booking is cancelled or not. So we have to remove those columns. So I have removed such columns here. Then imputation. Imputation is filling in missing values. So now comes the part where you have to fill in the missing values, the missing values basically that I had alluded to earlier, because we can't feed a model unless we take some decision based on the missing values. I won't go into the common ways of how we fix the missing values problem, but there are some notes here that you can go through. So for us, there were these 4 columns which had some missing values, and we will take some decision for each of these columns. So the decisions that we take is for children, the missing values, we use the mode, that is the most frequent value, which is 0. Country, we set a separate category called unknown. Agent, we set a separate category called unknown. Company, we set a separate category called unknown. Then non-integer ordinal variables. So this is August, so there is an inherent ordering, so I just replace it with the month number. So January becomes 1, February becomes 2, so that the ordering becomes evident for the model. That is what I do for month of year. And dealing with categorical variables. So I had alluded earlier the categorical variables in special mention. The reason is because what we have to do here is, say we have a category called food name, and food name has the value say apple, chicken, broccoli. So what we have to do is we have to we can't feed strings into the machine learning model, so we have to feed it numbers. So 1 becomes apple, 2 becomes chicken, 3 becomes broccoli, but we can't feed it in one column. The reason being that 1, 2, 3 integer numbers or even floats have an inherent ordering between them, but apple and chicken doesn't have any inherent ordering. So for each of these values we have to create a separate column. This is called one hot encoding, and the conversion of the label names from string to integer is called label encoding. So we have to do both those things that I have done here for all the categorical columns. And I also, because, so if you see here, for each of those, each categorical variables, all the values that are present in those categorical variables, each of them becomes a separate column. So the data set becomes much wide. Like if there is a column, categorical column with 5 values, and so then you need to make 5 columns for that. So it becomes very wide. So for those categorical columns which have a lot of values, I reduce some of the values which are present very less frequently. I make all of them into others, and if you see, even after replacing all of those values, others still form a very small percentage. It forms less than 1% for each of those cases. So here I set my target column. Target is the output column, is cancelled, and here I set the features. Features is basically the inputs, and you can see all the input variables here. Okay, this I have done. This is basically a quirk that I had while deployment, so I basically had to do this line, but you can ignore it for now. So these are all parts of pre-processing that I have to do to basically deal with categorical variables in the way that I had shown above. I have to run through these parts to save some time. So I talked about one hot encoding. So I am initiating a one hot encoding here, one hot encoder here, and what it does is you can see the number of columns now for the encoded values. So if you see here, so for so basically what I want to say here is that for categorical variables, the original number of columns was just 11, but now it becomes 576 because of there are so many values, unique values in categorical variables. Okay, so I do all this, I append categorical values to non-categorical values, and then finally I get my data set. Okay, I will save some information from here, and you will understand why it's required when I show you how to deploy a model. Now what we need to understand is creating a test set. So the reason we need to create a test set is because, as I showed you earlier, that if we don't create a test set, we won't understand very well how it is generalizing. And quite often we also divide it into three categories. One is training set, one is validation set, and one is test set. So on training, we train the data. For validation, we basically try out different models and check its performance, and then finally what we do is we basically test the final performance on the test set. Okay, and because it is a time series aware data set, we have some limitations on how we can do the train test split. So what we need to keep in mind is that basically we can't use we can't shuffle the data set when it's a time series data set, because we can't predict the past using the future. So we can't shuffle, we have to maintain the time series ordering. So the latest data has to be in the test set, the earlier data has to be in the training set, and so on. So I divide it here into train test set. Then I select a performance metric. So performance metric actually is the way we determine how our model is performing, and depending on the type of task that we want the machine learning model to perform, we actually select a performance metric. As I mentioned earlier, the percentage of cancelled to non-cancelled ratio is kind of skewed, so we will use something called F1 score. We won't be using accuracy that we used earlier. Okay, here are some things about precision, recall, F score, how to derive it, that I've given here. I'll skip over that for now because we're running out of time. Now it is about building models. So I have already saved the models here, so that because training them takes time, not all of them, but a lot of them takes time. So you can basically, what you can do is here, if you change it to train model equals to true, then it will train the model, otherwise it will just use the saved file that is already saved. And these files are saved here in the GitHub repository, which I imported earlier in the script. So if you see here, all the models have been saved, so that it takes, and for each of the model you can see how much time it takes here. I have given an estimation. So first of all, we try for this data set, we try logistic regression. As you can see, logistic regression we have tried here. I have made some modification, like I have increased the number of epochs, I have increased C to make it a slightly less regularized, and the performance that we finally get here, we get F score that we are calculating, we get 68.85%, and we can plot confusion matrix. I skipped over what confusion matrix is because of lack of time, but from here we can see. So this is the predicted level, this is the true level. So whatever falls here is correct, whatever falls here is also correct, and whatever falls here, that is, it has been predicted as 1 but it is actually 0, is wrong, and here is also wrong. So it gives a good idea of where the model is going wrong. Now let's try SVM. So for SVM model we get 69.09% on the validation set, and if you see from here, it is an improvement over the 68.85% F1 score that we get on the validation set. So SVM model performs slightly better. Then we'll be using something called gradient boosted decision trees. Now this is a big jump and there are a lot of concepts that I've skipped over, but the reason I wanted to use gradient boosted decision trees is because this is basically pretty much most of the times for tabular data, this gives state of the art results. So I wanted to show you that, and the way it works I have explained it here. So basically what the core algorithm is called a decision tree, where basically based on certain criterias you go somewhere in the decision tree and get an output. So I will skip over how this works here since there's less time, and I'll be using a library called XGBoost for gradient boosted decision trees, and let's see how it performs on decision trees. So for decision trees it gives 84.35%, which I think, oh no, sorry, it gives 69.30% on the validation set, and it gives 84.35% on the training set. Okay, so now I'll try to improve it further, and this is what is called hyperparameter tuning. Basically we try different combinations of hyperparameter and see what works. So there's a lot of things that I tried here. Okay, I think I will stop executing them and I'll just show the output so it is faster. First I tried minimum child weight, maximum depth and gamma, different values of that, and show what worked best. And here you can see the output. The parameters that work best are 0.5 for gamma, maximum depth 7, minimum child weight 1. And these are the type of things that you have to use from intuition. You have to see others work to understand which parameters you have to use, because you can try so many values but you'll have limited computing resources and time. So depending on how much computing resources and time you have to decide how much of hyperparameter tuning you can do, and you have to take a decision based on that. Okay, and after a lot of hyperparameter tuning here, the final model that I trained was 69.82% on the validation set, which is actually much better than I think the previous best was 69.03%, and a difference of more than 0.5 is very good normally in the machine learning community. So now another important thing is, currently most of machine learning is a black box, but how can we get some insight into what the model is understanding, how the model is behaving, so that we get more confidence in the model. Now this is something that varies from model to model, how much information we can get, but luckily the thing that we chose XGBoost, I mean gradient boosted decision trees. From that we can get feature importance. Oh sorry, I did not execute a lot in the middle, so I can't run more. And you can see feature importance wise, the most important feature that the model is looking at is deposit type with 45% importance, and these all sums up to 100%. Next is agent, and so on. Okay, and then you can see the feature importance plot. The same thing is graphed here. You can see that most important is deposit type, next is agent, next is country, and so on. Now let's see its performance on the test set. Remember earlier we had created 3 partitions. One is the training set, one is the validation set, and finally we want to check the final prediction of the test set. And final prediction on test set, if you see the F1 score, it is 79.18%, which is actually better than the performance on the validation set, which is very rare. But luckily for this example, I got much better performance in the test set somehow. And if you see here, so actually in reality something is not cancelled, and actually it is speed predicted also as not cancelled 50%. Then so basically you can see how it breaks down here in this confusion matrix. Now let's see how to deploy this model. We have already tested it, we have already trained the model. Now how to deploy it. So I'll be using something called Flask. Okay, and what Flask does is basically it's a web server, and I will be using a REST API to basically hit that endpoint, and then the model will predict the value and send it back via that endpoint. Actually I think I'll skip this part, but all the code is written here. All you need to do is run it. Even the code to execute to make the API endpoint call is also given here, and you can do it. The last thing that I actually wanted to show you is, so this is basically a basic introduction. Now what I wanted to show you is what state of the art machine learning model machine learning can do. Okay, and I wanted to give you two examples. So here it's a picture of our beloved Modi ji along with a lot of celebrities. In fact, this went viral on Twitter. So let's see, using an image based model, what actually can be predicted. So this is Microsoft's computer vision toolkit, and it can predict a lot of things from here. So let's see. So I submit the, okay, just one sec. Okay, yeah, it got it. Okay, so what you can see here, so this is the output that it got. Now one thing that I wanted to show, which was most interesting to me, was the image caption. So you give an image, the model will try to caption it. Then the caption is this: Ranveer Singh, Siddharth Malhotra, Varun Dhawan, blah blah blah, Narendra Modi, Ayushmann Khurrana posing for the camera. So just in the caption only, it actually was able to identify so many celebrities based on the training model based on the training data that it was given. Okay, with a confidence of 99.09%. So I think that, in my opinion, is quite good, imagining that a machine can do this. And the last thing that I wanted to show was what NLP based. So NLP is natural language processing. So what state of the art natural language processing model can do. But I think for brevity I will skip this part, because this will take some time, 2-3 minutes. So that's it. Now what next from here? So the motivation, as I mentioned at the beginning, was to try and give a code first flavor into what machine learning is all about. Show you how to approach a typical machine learning problem end to end on real world data set. And if you feel inquisitive or want to give machine learning a try or want to know more, here are some good sources that I mentioned below. And it is important to remember that here I have skipped most of the theory, but the theory is also very important to have a good intuition about what to do and everything. There's a very good course in Coursera, and all of these are free. So please stop paying for machine learning courses if you can, and at least try the free ones, because I feel the free ones are much better. These are world class courses. So this is Coursera by Andrew Ng, machine learning, introduction to machine learning. Then there is practical machine learning for coders by Jeremy Howard. These two deal with traditional machine learning. Then there is deeplearning.ai by Andrew Ng, which teaches about the fundamentals of deep learning and the theory. Then there is Fast AI by Jeremy Howard, which takes a more practical based approach, which I like very much. And then I came across this, which gives deep learning lecture series by Yann-Le Cun, who is considered one of the fathers of machine learning, I think fathers of computer vision. And it's very good because it goes in depth into some of the more theoretical aspects of deep learning, which is good for an advanced learner. About me, I'm a machine learning engineer at a startup, and you can find more about me at this website below. These are the websites from where I took some help, so I've mentioned it here. You can find all of this as mentioned in this repo, github.com rickdatta/hands-on repo. Please feel free to use it, modify it, play with it. You can use Google Colab, which is free, easy to use, and you can experiment a lot. And with that, I will end my talk here. Thank you.